We started our 2 weeks in Scotland in Edinburgh. Upon our arrival, we went directly into the heart of the city. The old city's main street is the Royal Mile, which runs from Edinburgh Castle down to Holyrood Palace, with plenty to see along the way. We booked our visit to Edinburgh Castle to ensure we didn't miss the firing of the 1 o'clock gun. We thought the rest of the castle would take a couple of hours to explore. However, it was so rich in history, we ended up spending most of the day there.
And then you could take a few prizes. Like what? She was sold as a merchant man.
We did have enough time before sunset to walk to the other end of the Royal Mile to see Holyrood Palace, which is the Royals' residence in Edinburgh, as well as the Parliament Building and Arthur's Seat.
And then all the way around this way, that's Arthur's Seat right there.
On our final day in Edinburgh, we walked to the little village of Dean on the Water of Leith. From there, it was a short walk to the Royal Botanical Gardens. What a delightful escape from the busy city, capped off by a delicious lunch at the cafe, where they used ingredients grown in the gardens. Speaking of food, we found a list of the Scottish food we wanted to try. We will check them off as we go through this video. We started off our food adventure nice and easy. Fresh scones and clotted cream. Our search for the best fish and chips in Edinburgh led us to #fish. The fish with chippy sauce did not disappoint. And what better to wash it down with than Scotland's famous iron brew?
Oh, no. No.
Actually, a lot of things would have been better.
What does it taste like to you?
Bubblegum.
Bubblegum, that's exactly what I thought.
High on our list, for Rick, was haggis with tatties and neeps, which he ordered as a dinner entree and loved it. I had one bite. It's pretty good. One morning for breakfast, we found a shop selling morning buns with square sausage.
Oh, it looks like meat.
And for lunch, we enjoyed Scottish pie.
Oh, yeah.
With some tablet and fudge for dessert. After 3 days in Edinburgh, we headed north to Aviemore. Along the way, we made a couple of stops. First was Loch Leven Castle, which requires a boat ride because it's on an island.
We're in relatively shallow water. There's a sandbank most of the way up here. You'll skip the sandbank and come into the top of the island.
This is where Mary, Queen of Scots, was held for a year, tragically miscarrying twins and abdicating her throne before performing a harrowing escape. The other stop was the Beatrix Potter Garden. This was about the extent of it. We stayed 2 nights in Aviemore in a rural Airbnb that was a converted barn and had the added bonus of rescue donkeys there to greet us. We made good use of the one day we had in Aviemore. First, we took a 2-hour hike on an easy trail around a loch in the Rothamerchus forest. At the one tricky stream crossing, Rick was intent on helping me. Demonstrating his amazing dexterity. In the middle of the loch were the ruins of an old island castle. After a short rest and quick lunch, we headed off to our next destination. Our hike on the Frank Bruce Sculpture Trail was a mixture of beauty and sadness. We learned the artists who created the sculptures had intended them to be left alone to go back to their natural state, However, a strong storm had caused many of them to topple, and several trails were inaccessible. Some of the sculptures were even starting to disappear into the landscape. We felt fortunate to be able to experience what still remained of the beautiful work. On our last night in Aviemore, we were able to check Scottish beef off our list. The next morning we packed up, said goodbye to our new four-legged friends, and headed to Skye. After mostly clear days, the skies opened up and gave us our first taste of typical Scottish weather. We considered touring the grounds of Donnan, but the wind convinced us otherwise. The rain continued as we made our way to Skye, with brief glimpses of sunshine producing vivid rainbows. At the end of a long and rainy drive, we arrived at our Airbnb and settled in to watch the storm roll across the landscape. In the morning, we woke to a beautiful day and headed out to visit Dunvegan Castle. Touring Dunvegan is very much a self-guided affair, but there is a lot to see, both inside and outside. We opted to take a boat ride to see the seals that settle on the rocks off the coast. On our return to the castle, we explored the gardens and then had a bite to eat.
On our list, venison stew, so wild game. And what's this?
Coming in from the side too. On the way home, Rick navigated a whole new level of single-lane Scottish driving.
Quarter-mile home. There you go. That's the move.
the way. There you go. We got an early start the next morning for our most ambitious day of hiking yet, beginning with the hike up the Old Man of Store.
We're here at 8 o'clock, and you can see there's plenty of parking on the upper level here still, and quite a bit down here on the lower level. South entrance, or whatever. We're about 35 minutes into the hike. Linda wants to do the interpretive trail because it's moderate and not strenuous. Look at her go.
Like a herd of turtles. Halfway up the trail, we found a good spot to launch the drone and got some impressive shots of the old man. Near the top of the trail, the clouds broke and the sun lit up the coastline. After spending a few minutes to enjoy the well-earned view, we headed back down. It didn't take long to realize that starting early was a wise choice. The trails changed from an occasional encounter with another hiker to a continuous stream and a fully packed parking lot. From Store, we headed up the road to Filt Falls, a coastal cliff waterfall on the edge of Kilt Rock. From both the land and the air, we were able to enjoy impressive views of Kilt Rock. Those views helped clarify how the cliffs got the name. Then we headed farther up the peninsula, passing some slower traffic, toward Rubahunish. Our goal was to find a bothy that we'd heard of and wanted to see if we could find for ourselves. In Scotland, there are hundreds of bothies, which are simple and usually very remote structures built to provide shelter for hikers and campers. This particular bothy was of interest because of its unique location and spectacular views.
Yes, all right. Let's check it out. From the vicinity of a bothy. But in here you got a bunk bed and a lower bunk. And then there's like a little desk area here. Somebody's left some paper for kindling, and they've left some fuel. And then the sitting room.
The lookout was renovated in 2006 in memory of David J.J. Brown, anti-materialist and wilderness lover.
And this is the view. 180 degrees.
We were the only visitors during our 30-minute visit and used the time to eat a packed lunch and enjoy the oceanfront views. After our busiest day of the trip, we drove back to our Airbnb, did our laundry, and hung it out to dry in the cool evening breeze. The next morning we headed out in a light rain and got our first close-up experience of the famous Highland cows, or rather, Highland coos. These long-haired hippies of the cow world were in no rush to clear a path for our departure. In hindsight, we wonder if they enjoyed our visit and simply didn't want us to leave. Oh, so sweet. Saying goodbye to Skye, we looked forward to lunch in the small village of Kyle of Lochhalsh, just over the bridge. It was here that we found the Fisherman's Kitchen and their award-winning Cullen skink, a hearty stew made of potatoes and smoked fish. The Cullen skink was good, but the fried fish was even better, maybe the best of the trip. Oh, that's hot.
That's really hot.
The rest of our drive to Glencoe was beautifully scenic. We arrived at our unique accommodations late in the afternoon. These cottages were tucked into a forest on land behind an old rectory and looked like something out of a fairy tale. Each cottage came with a small bathroom and a large clawfoot bathtub right in the bedroom. After a quick meal, we knocked another item off our food list, Tunnock's Sweets. We tried 2 varieties, the milk chocolate tea cakes, kind of an all-in-one s'mores, and the caramel wafer biscuits. Next morning, we packed up our little cottage and headed out to Steel Falls.
And it's supposed to be a relatively easy path, but the scenery, you can see it's like we're in the Swiss Alps or something. It's a beautiful day too, just sunny and clear blue sky. So there are some challenging spots.
This ended up being one of the most beautiful hikes we've ever done. After a little effort to climb through the lower pass, the trail opens up to a valley that's nothing short of breathtaking. We ate our picnic lunch while enjoying a great view of the waterfall. Before heading back, Rick just had to try out the cable bridge, and no, he didn't fall in this time. The hike back to the parking lot was a bit easier going down through the ravine, but still required traversing some tricky and slippery terrain. In fact, on the way back, we watched a rescue team save a hiker who had slipped down into the ravine off a narrow part of the trail. We made it back without incident and headed to our next stop, Glenfinnan Viaduct. This is the famous stone trestle from the Harry Potter movies that the Hogwarts Express crosses. The train passes each direction only twice a day, and crowds gather during the scheduled crossings. Plan your arrival accordingly. After a day of driving, we finally arrived in Oban.
The destination is on your right. Pearl Oban Hotel.
Oban is a very touristy town, but its popularity is well deserved. On our first morning, we were able to knock another big item off our list, the Scottish breakfast. Then we were on to a full-day excursion, starting with a ferry ride to the Isle of Mull. Exiting the docks, we boarded a bus for a guided tour of the island. This took us to Fiamport, where we took a boat ride to see the Isle of Staffa. Staffa is a unique island formed with basalt columns that almost look man-made. Typically, they land on the island and allow people to explore the large cave, but high tides and ocean swells prevented them from landing that day. Back in Fiamport, we took a small ferry across to the Isle of Iona. Iona is known as the birthplace of Christianity in Scotland. An abbey still stands near the first Christian settlement on the island. We ate lunch on Iona, which included mussels from the Isle of Mull. We then walked through the ruins of the old abbey, and then took a self-guided tour of the current and still operating abbey. After a few hours on Iona, we headed back the way we came. We enjoyed a beautiful sunset on the 2-hour ride back. What a great way to end the day. The next morning, we checked Scottish cheese off our list. On our last full day in Oban, we took a tiny ferry over to Kierera Island. Our plan for the day was to hike to the ruins of Glenfinnan Castle and visit the nearby tea garden. This was clearly a lesser-known destination, but ended up being one of our favorites.
Hey, Linda.
Some unwashed free-range hen eggs with an honesty box.
Nice.
And some wipes for your hands after you touch the chicken poo. The signs along the road continually built our anticipation.
We're halfway there.
Finally, there it was, the tea garden! Made it. But we weren't hungry enough to stop yet, so on to the castle. The view as we rounded the corner was spectacular. Glenfinnan Castle is perched on a cliff on the coast of Kierera, with an unbelievable view of blue waters and rocky surroundings.
Pretty cool. I told you.
After exploring the inside of the castle, Rick took one more drone flight around the castle to try to capture how amazing this location is. Then we hiked back to the tea garden and enjoyed sandwiches, cakes, and coffee.
Indoor seating in this cute little barn. There's Linda. Some more cottages. And then if you go out the back side of the barn, there's a whole picnic area.
Hiking back to the docks, we saw lots of sheep and even a little family of rabbits enjoying the sunny weather. At the docks, we boarded the next ferry back to Oban. If you ever visit, we highly recommend this 5-mile hike. A round-trip ferry ticket is only about £5. We made it back early enough to get some fresh oysters and mussels at the Oban Fish Market and check another item off our list. That night we enjoyed a whiskey tasting. Winding down our trip, we left Oban and headed to our final stop, Glasgow. That night we were fortunate to get a table at the renowned Chaku Bombay Cafe for some Glasgow curry. Before leaving Glasgow, we found a great little donut shop and stocked up for the trip back to Edinburgh. Along the way, we stopped at the famous Stirling Castle. At the Castle Cafe, we were surprised to find one of the more difficult items on our food list, Dundee cake. We spent a few hours touring the halls and residences at the castle and then continued our drive. We made a brief stop at the Falkirk Wheel, an engineering marvel, along with a stop at the Falkirk Kelpies, two huge horse sculptures.
I think there's birds living in there.
That night, we arrived at the airport hotel and were pleasantly surprised to find the restaurant offered both Scottish salmon, yum, and sticky toffee pudding, double yum.
It looks fabulous.
As we boarded our flight, we were both exhausted and exhilarated from all we had seen and done in Scotland. Knowing how much more there is to see, we can't wait to visit again.